Fantastic. Yeah, it's lovely to be here. My name is Anya, and I was just saying that this is something that I've wanted to do for quite some time. I was actually due to do some sessions with Home for Good adoption charity, and Fertility Network, the charity I work for. And over the next few weeks, but obviously with Corona that's got changed. So it's really lovely to be here today. I'm a member of Adoption UK, and it's such a brilliant charity, so thank you for having me. So a little bit about my background. I work for a charity called Fertility Network UK. I've worked for them for about 4 years, but I've worked within the fertility sector for about 14 years now. This came from our own personal experience of having 6 years of infertility treatment, 5 rounds of IVF, and finally being successful with having 2 children from IVF, but then also having experience of adoption. After that, we went on to adopt our little boy, who is now 8 years old. So I've worked within the fertility sector. I am someone that has been through infertility, and I'm also an adoptive parent. And I think those 2 different experiences, and our experience of becoming a family, has led me very much to want to do some work around building a bridge, if you like, from the experience of infertility to becoming a parent through adoption. And that's what I want to start exploring today in this session. Just to say that I am not an adoption expert as such, and so many of the practicalities that you may want to know answers to, you'd be really advised to go and speak to Adoption UK directly, or First for Adoption, or some of the adoption agencies directly. So there may well be some practical issues that I can't help with today, but what I do want to explore is that concept of a bridge from one experience to another. So what I want to look at the heart of today is debunking the myth of they should just adopt. A phrase that I'm sure so many of us have heard time and time again when it's just thrown out at people going through infertility, is that they should just adopt, and they should stop being selfish and trying for treatment, and they should do this, and they should just adopt. And I want to explore 2 aspects of that statement today. I want to explore what they means, and I want to explore the concept of just adoption. So we're going to look at 2 aspects of that sentence today, and hopefully then give some time at the end for some questions and answers. So first of all, the they. The reason I object so strongly to this is that obviously it lumps everyone and it is when people are going through trying to crossover issues and common experiences. But I really strongly object to this concept of they and the trying to conceive community all having this one amorphous shared experience. So I really feel that it's important to say that right at the start, that everyone's journey is utterly unique. Everyone's journey is very different. And there is no one size fits all when we're trying to conceive and when we're moving to look maybe at some of the issues around adoption. So I've worked within the trying to conceive community for so many years now. And one of the common themes that I often find people dealing with is the concept of there being almost a grief cycle, and trying to conceive feeling very similar to the concept of grieving. So when we talk about a grief cycle, there's often very different stages to it. The feeling of denial and anger and shame and isolation and all the feelings that come with grief, that people trying to conceive often feel that they're sharing. So I think sometimes when we talk about the experience of infertility, it's very helpful to use that framework, that actually it is an experience of grieving and of coming to terms with a loss of what we thought our life was going to look like and what we actually find that it does look like. And that rawness and that shock that we find ourselves within a grief cycle can often be a very shared experience when going through trying to conceive. So I think that that image of a grief cycle and of grieving can be quite a helpful one when we're talking about infertility. And yet it is a grief that people don't always understand within society. When someone loses a loved one, there is a very obvious and tangible loss that people can see, and people don't always understand within society what grieving feels like and looks like, but there is an understanding, I think, with the loss of a partner or of a parent, that people can at least start to understand. When going through infertility, there is a loss and a grief that is very often misunderstood within society. And it's because of that that you get these throwaway comments like, they should just adopt. And I think that means that very often when we're going through fertility issues, there's an isolation and there's a loneliness that we can experience. And what you find during those times is that people are often losing friends and friendships that they felt would be there for them, and people misunderstanding their experience of infertility, while actually regaining some really amazing new friends. And that's a shared experience with the adoption community, that actually you find that some people really can't understand your experience of grief, and other people that maybe you'd never met before can understand what your experience when we're trying to conceive can feel a very isolated one and a very lonely one. And so I just as a throwaway encourage you during this time, if that is an experience that you're finding yourself in, please know that you're not alone, and please do reach out to people that do understand it. So Fertility Network, we have a wide range of support structures, support groups, and online help that you can access, that people will understand experiencing at the moment. So the grief that maybe you've been experiencing when trying to conceive, and the roller coaster of emotions and the uncertainty that you've been holding on to, of when will we have our family, when will we become a family, what does that look like for us, can be really exacerbated when we look at actually stopping treatment. So when you get to that stage of thinking, maybe you've had a few treatment cycles, maybe just the one, but actually you're starting to think, I don't know if we can do this anymore. And that can come around for a variety of reasons. Maybe that will be one of the questions at the end. It's one of the questions that we get asked such a lot, is how do you know when it's right to move from trying to conceive to adoption? And there isn't one size fits all. We'll look at this a little bit more later, but stopping treatment can feel even more that you're part of that grieving cycle, and it can be really adding to the whole uncertainty of when will our family be coming. But actually it can be that there is a right time to be stopping treatment, and it's the better of the options for you as a couple or as an individual. And there is no right or wrong to when that will happen, but for many people it will just be a case of actually emotionally fertility treatment has been too hard, or even physically the diagnosis is it's unlikely to be working for you. So if you find yourself at that stage of moving from one part to another, just be incredibly kind to yourself. It's a really tough time, and that's what I want to start exploring in things like this and webinars like today. I know Adoption UK have done some work on this, on how we move from treatment into adoption, but it's not an easy route, and you will need to really implement self-care. You will need to relook at support structures, and you will need to really give yourself space and time when moving from one thing to another. And one of the key things I'd want to say right at the start with that movement from one space to another is that adoption is a cure for infertility. Again, going back to that throwaway statement of they should just adopt, implicit within that statement is very much that concept that adoption will cure infertility. It will cure the heartache of it. It will take away all the pain and wash it all away and make everything all better. So adoption is incredible. It's an amazing route to becoming parents, and it does something wonderful for children in giving them another chance. But it doesn't cure infertility. And I think it's really important to say that as a foundational statement right at the start. And actually that can be a really useful thing in that maybe it doesn't have to, maybe it can be a new chapter, but maybe that doesn't mean that everything that's happened before suddenly gets swept away and is made perfect again. There isn't perfect in this whole scenario in trying to conceive or looking at adoption. Actually, there is just moving forward and finding what's better for you as a family. So adoption is a route to becoming a family. It is a route to becoming parents. It is a route that I will always advocate for and always support, and always with the right type of support and care say is a fantastic route to become a family. It means that without stable, so do be aware of that when building that bridge from one thing to another, that it isn't making everything magic away. So during this time when you are moving from one stage to another, it can be really useful to look at how you can facilitate finding some form of closure on one part of your life to another. Now, this can be done in all sorts of ways, and I've seen people do some really quite interesting things during that time. One of the things that I've seen people do is doing something tangible, like maybe planting a tree, or there are places where you can go and have a tree dedicated to something, or you can mark it in some way by sharing with family and friends that you are closing one aspect of your life and restarting another. It may be that you want to do something practical and tangible to mark this change in your life. Another really important thing can be doing something like starting counselling if you haven't already, but specifically when moving from one stage of life to another. So I think that can be a really, really useful thing to do at this stage, is giving yourself that space to explore what letting go of fertility treatments and starting the adoption process can be. So there's some fantastic counsellors out there. The British Infertility Counselling Authority have got many good counsellors that I would recommend and would be able to help in this movement from one thing to another. But to quickly go back to that concept of how do you know when it is the right time to stop treatment and start looking at adoption, there isn't a one size fits all. Many people stop for many different reasons. So I've seen people do many cycles of IVF, for example, and just keep going and keep going. I've seen many people do one cycle and decide actually this isn't for them, it's just too hard. So how do you know when you want to stop as a couple or as individual? I would say that there's many different reasons. Obviously finances can take a part of that. Emotional health, I would say, is one of the key things. But I think the analogy that is really helpful at this stage is not which route is perfect and is 100%, but which route is the better of the options for you at this stage, which perhaps 51% better than the other stage. So it's not looking for something to suddenly feel that is the route forward and that is perfect, but there'll be one of the two options, either carrying on with treatment, choosing to stop, for example, or looking at option that actually feels about 51%. It just feels like it's got that edge in that it would be better for us to start looking at. And I think for me, what is helpful with that analogy, 51% rather than 100%, is that we can spend such a long time in our life looking for an 100%, looking for everything to suddenly feel, yep, that's right. But actually, generally, people's experience isn't 100%. It's actually that this is the better option for us as a couple or as an individual. And so once you've made that tentative decision, actually, let's start exploring adoption. Let's start looking at that. This may be the better of the options for us. You tend to have what the clinics or what the adoption agency call an imposed grieving period anyway. And that will be a period of time from 6 months to a year when you have stopped treatment fully and you will be looking at moving into adoption. So 6 months to a year when there is an imposed hold time. And it's really hard when you've been a couple who've been having to wait for treatment, wait for test results, wait to know whether there's a pregnancy, when there's been years and years probably of waiting to have an adoption agency then turn around and say, actually, you now need to wait for another 6 months to a year. And so what I'd encourage you to do during that time is, rather than seeing it as waiting, rather than seeing it as dead time, to see it as an investment and to see it as proactive. So if you have 6 months, say, and you have at this time, at the moment with the COVID, imposed time of waiting and moving from one thing to another, I would just really encourage you to use that time proactively and to see it as the start of building that bridge from one stage to another. So use that time really fully to be reaching out to people who understand. I would use it to speak to adoptive families if you know any, or if there are any that you can call on during this time. I would use it to either in physical or online to attend open evenings from adoption agencies or consortiums. I would use it to read books on adoption, and each day to be doing something proactive and tangible towards moving from one stage to another. So one part of the bridge to another. So don't see this as wasted time, see this as an investment. Look at who is out there to help you build that bridge and do something tangible every day. I think one of the best cognitive behavioural therapy tips I ever heard in terms of infertility was that it's really easy to allow infertility to take over 100% of our thinking. And that can happen partly because actually we're not giving it the respect and the focus that we deserve to do that for. And one of the ways to help do that is actually to be proactive and say, yes, I am going to focus on this every single day. And I am going to give that some of my headspace every single day. And ironically, the more you can give that headspace, the more you can slightly let go, knowing that you have invested in this season in your life. Well, the same goes for this bridging season, that actually, if you can do something proactively every day to move you from one stage to another, actually that does help you let go a little bit and know that stuff is happening. So I would encourage you after today to go away, a really comprehensive list of who will be part of that bridge building, who are the adoptive families you can reach out to, who are the online support that you can look at, where you can start finding information, and each day starting to build that bridge from infertility and treatment to building a family through adoption. During this time as well, when there is an enforced grieving period, one of the most fundamental things you can be doing, and hopefully you've been doing it anyway if you've been trying to conceive, is really, really being proactive about self-care. During our time as adoptive parents, I have had to learn how to look after myself and look after our couple and our relationship in a way that I have never had to, because we have been tested so much. And actually that learning and that ability to really, really prioritize self-care can be starting now and should be being invested in now. So again, as part of that bridge building, to really be thinking, what does self-care mean for me? How can I be really proactively learning to look after myself and my relationship, so that when we do hopefully become adoptive parents, we have got those skills and those abilities to our hands, so that when we are being tested, which being an adoptive parent will do, we know how to look after ourselves. We know what works for our partner, and we know what works for ourselves. So I would really encourage you, as part of that bridge building time and that enforced grieving cycle time, to really think, how do I look after myself? Who are the people in my life that build me up? What works for me in terms of self-care? So that can be anything from journaling to yoga, to going for a walk, to making sure you get enough sleep, you're eating well, looking at nutrition. All of those kind of things are so important when learning about how to look after ourselves. So use this time proactively to work on how I can look after me, so that when there is an adopted child in your house that needs your everything and is calling on all of your reserves, you know how to refuel and to retank. So use this time, use this bridge building time to look at the practicalities and look at how you can best look after yourself. Because coming back to that initial statement, there is no just in adoption. Adoption for us has been one of the best things we've ever done, but by far it has been the hardest thing we've ever done. And as a family, I've spoken about this very openly, but it tested us in a way that I was really, really amazed by. When we adopted our little one, we were already parents, and you know, we've been through some of the practicalities of being parents, we've been through fertility treatment, but I have to say nothing tested us like becoming adoptive parents and looking after a child with trauma. And I still will maintain to this day and going forwards that it is one of the best things we've ever done, and that I love our children equally, but nothing has pushed me and has called on all my reserves like dealing with a child with trauma. And so I will always say there is no just in adoption. This throwaway concept that it's just another child and you know you can just adopt, you have to have so many reserves and so much support in place when going through adoption. And so even now, if you can start to be thinking, how will I self-care, who are my support people, that will serve you in really good stead going forward. And it's something, hand on heart, I wish that I'd done a little bit more fully when we were going through the actual adoption process. I wish that I'd paid a little bit less lip service to who my support structure was, and I wish I'd been a little bit more proactive in really looking at self-care and support. I think those would be my two top things going forward. So looking at the practicalities of the process, you've started to build that bridge, you've started to look at the concept of there being no just in adoption, you've started to really prioritise who you are. I would take this time again to be proactive in reflection. And one of the acronyms that I use a lot in the fertility community is what do you need right now? WDYNRN. What do you need right now? So on a daily basis to be thinking, right, what do I need right now in terms of building that bridge? What do I need right now in terms of self-care? And to start to be a little bit reflective in the overall process. And when you do start the actual process of adoption and being matched and being assessed, and the actual tangible time of the adoption process, which again, Adoption UK can talk you through much better than I can, you will be being assessed on what kind of child you can deal with, what your home can deal with, what you're able to deal with from your background, what baggage you may be bringing from your own parenting style, how you were parented as children, how you and your partner interact as potential parents. All of those kind of things will come up in your assessment as prospective adopters. So to be using this time to just start to unpick those things, you know, what was unique about your parenting when you were growing up? What were some of the pluses? What are some of the negatives that you will carry forward? How might you be different to your partner? How might you be on the same page? All of those kind of things are really useful to start to unpick during this time. And you can unpick that through journaling, through talking with your partner, and again, through counselling. So to use this time proactively can be really, really helpful. And then I've alluded to it before, but be really proactive in building your support structure. Nothing has tested me like being an adoptive parent, and we have at times had to be quite reactive when I wish we'd been a little bit more strategic in terms of our support. So one thing that I would always advocate to people looking at becoming adoptive parents is really to be very, very proactive in who will be there for you when you are a newly adoptive family. Who are the key people that you can turn to in a crisis? Who are the key people that will be there when you're having a tough day? Who are the key people that you can ring when you're having a hard time, or who can maybe come in and give that bit of practical support to an adoptive child? This is one of the things that comes up during the assessment process. And again, I wish that I'd been a bit more proactive in that. So one of the ways that I think can be really useful is to start to educate those people that are around you that may be part of your key support structure, and to really start helping them with the realities of what adoption is. Adoption UK have some really good fact sheets. It may be that you can give them some books, or just share with them your journey as you're going along about the realities of adoption, because the people in your support structure will have their own myths and fantasies about what adoption is and isn't. And it's really helpful if you can start to unpick that with them, so that when that adopted child is placed with you, they are equipped to be your best support structure. So build your team around you really proactively equip that team. And if possible, one of the best things that we have done, and again, it was after we'd adopted, but I wish we'd done it before, we held a family and friends day where we got a group of about 15 of our closest family and friends, and we talked to them about the reality of our experience as adoptive parents and some of the highs and lows that we've been through. And we had an amazing adoptive support helper who's been an absolute godsend in our lives, and has done work with us through the Adoption Support Fund. And he came and spoke on our behalf about the realities of looking after a child, in our case, with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And he was incredible. And actually you could see these little light bulbs go off around the room as people suddenly realised what adoption actually means rather than what they thought it meant. And that was one of the best things that we've done. I wish that we'd had the opportunity to do that pre-adoption, even just very early into placement. I think it was one of the things that's made the biggest difference, because having that support structure around you that really understands what you're going through is so fundamental and really part of this building of a bridge. So if you can do that, is an option to do a family and friends day. It may be remotely at the moment, it may be in face-to-face by this point, but that is a really, really good solid thing that you can do. So to sort of close, I would say that this concept of they can just adopt is not true. They will have their own journeys. We all have our own journeys to becoming a family, whatever that means, whether it's the two of you staying as a unit, or surrogacy, or adoption, or treatment. There are so many routes to parenthood, all equally valid. There are so many routes to redefining family, all equally valid. So they can just adopt demeans everyone, and there is no just in adoption. But I would encourage you to use this time to reflect on the realities of adoption, to reflect on what adoption might mean for you as a unit, to build the support really, really proactively, to build ongoing care for yourself and for your partner proactively. And I would end by saying adoption, again, it is one of the best things we've ever done, but it is the hardest. And so get that self-care sorted, get that external care sorted, but do look into it as an option for you and for you as a couple. So thank you. Over to you guys for any questions.
That's it. I'm unmuted now, aren't I? Sorry,
you're back.
I'm back. Trying to get used to all this technology. Can you see me? Yeah, great.
I could see you. Yeah, all great.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Thank you. We've got a few questions, so if we can go up with those.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
We have roughly how long does the adoption process take from initial inquiry? It's around about 6 months. It does vary slightly on situations, especially at the moment, because sometimes things are taking a bit longer because of COVID. But adoption agencies are still operational. They are still running information events. They are still running preparation training. They're still doing the approval panels. So things are still going on. It has taken a bit of time for the local authorities to get used to what's going on, but we are seeing them move forward. You find on the whole that it's around 6 months, I would say, from initial inquiry to approval, but that may depend on if you have a very unusual situation with your DBS. So if they're having to go to lots of different counties and countries that you may have lived in for your DPS, that can have an impact. If they're asking you to do anything medically, that can have a slight hold up sometimes, to gain some childcare experience. So it's done very much on an individual basis, but around the 6 month mark is the average. Got another question that's come up. And do you know if there's a maximum age to adopt babies? And the answer is no. There is no maximum age at all to adopt. So I know of people who are actually, they were approved and had a little one who was 9 months placed with them, and both in the couple were 56 years old.
Wow.
So there's absolutely no age for adoption. It used to be that there was rules, but that was all changed about 5-6 years ago. So please don't let that put you off. I would say just make sure you've got the energy for running around, especially after a little one. But yeah, that's
absolutely.
Yeah. And
I was going to say, that's one of the things that actually I think is a really interesting thing, having gone through both experiences. People talk about how awful the adoption assessment process is and how difficult it was. And I have to say, after going through fertility treatment, the actual assessment process and all of that, it was an absolute walk in the park. I mean, I know there's that varies from person to person, so I'm not saying that's everyone's experience, but having the uncertainty of going through treatment and there not being a cut-off point, and to have someone say, gosh, actually it probably will take 6 months, and yes, there's paperwork and that kind of thing, but it's such a different experience. For us, the hard part was the other side. But
yeah, and it's a very detailed process, which I think that you don't have with fertility so much. Yes. But you know that when you start the adoption process, you have your initial visit. You then move on to stage 1 and what that contains.
Yeah.
And it's much more prescriptive, much more detailed.
Yeah.
So you
which is lovely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we didn't mind.
Yeah, it still feels like a lot of it is out of your control. And I would say
Yes.
that's probably the feedback that we get the most. I'm an adoptive parent myself. That you spend so long thinking about it that you're ready. You're ready way before you even think about picking up the phone. So you just want everything to happen. And it feels like a lot of this is out of your control, very much like with fertility treatment. And that's really quite hard. But I think if anyone's been through fertility treatment is used to having to just do as you're told, getting on with it, hoping, praying.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So we've got a couple more questions that have come in, which is brilliant. Thank you. So I'm just getting the questions. Is the counselling for couples free of charge? Who's contact for this service? Before we went through the adoption process, from our initial interview, we were told that we had to go away and have some specialist fertility counselling, which I think is fairly common. We found, as our GP actually found someone for us, and we paid for that. But there are different agencies, which I'm sure Anya will know much more about.
Yeah, the one that we always recommend as a charity is the British Infertility Counselling Authority, and they deal with all aspects of treatment, from initial diagnosis right through to stopping and moving on to adoption or other avenues. And so, really good start. But yeah, may well. I think it's finding a place, moving from one thing to another. I think that's a really helpful thing to do. But Beaker would be the first place that we'd be looking at.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I've got some more questions, so I'll just grab those up. One thing that puts this person off is that they're a private person, and the level of social service, are they full on in your life? Yes, would be my very blunt, honest, that they are in your life and they're a very important part of your life, but it can still be very private within that. So you don't need to tell anybody else at that stage that that's what's going on, apart from the people who are going to be your referees. It's not something that you have to go out and share. I had a very good relationship with my social worker and felt very comfortable being able to open up and talk. And I would say actually it's a lot less intrusive than a lot of the treatment that you go through for fertility.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully if you have a good social worker, as most people will do, you actually, it can be quite cathartic. It can be downloading some of the stuff that you're thinking through anyway. Hopefully you should feel like they're on your side and bringing out the best in you and seeing your potential. That's what a good social worker should be doing. So yes, it is obtrusive and there's lots to it, but actually it can feel quite positive as well. And as you said, when you're going through treatment, so much of it can feel very out of your hands and very you know, that you're having to self-advocate all the time, and to actually have someone say, do you know what, with this couple, I can see the difference. I remember the first time I saw that in writing, and actually it was incredibly healing to have someone put that down in writing. These people will be good parents, and just think, wow, you know. So it can be a positive as well, but absolutely it can feel quite a lot of time in your home.
Yeah, you may be talking of potentially 6 to 10 meetings with your social worker.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not hundreds. And yeah, at the moment a lot of them are done by Skype as well, so that's another method. So I wouldn't let that put you off. I think the process, 90% of the doctors find that actually when they look back on the process, they've found that it's been really beneficial and helped them to learn about themselves by going through that.
Yeah, which is what it should be. It should be part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Got another question here. Does it take longer, or is it less likely to happen if you try to adopt a single parent? Absolutely not. The process is exactly the same, whether you are single or whether you're a couple, whether you're a same-sex couple, no matter what your age, the process is the same. For some children that come up for adoption, need adoption, they may need a two-parent family, but there's also other children that they need a single parent because of what's happened to their past. So there is absolutely no difference, and everybody comes with their own strengths of what they can bring to make their family. So yeah, would you recommend independent adoption agency or the trust adoption? Which is better service? I'm guessing from that question you may be in Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland have trust setups and theirs is done slightly differently. So I apologise if you're not Northern Ireland. England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have slightly different adoption processes. There's pros and cons to going with a trust or a local authority, or you may hear talk about an RAA, which is a regional adoption agency. They are a cluster of local authorities that have come together to make the adoption process much stronger, robust, positive experience. To a voluntary agency, someone like Bernardo's are a voluntary adoption agency. Family Futures are a voluntary adoption agency. So there's pros and cons of going through them both. If I have my time again, and my advice to you would be, is to go and find out about your local trust or local authority or RAA. Go and attend a information evening, but also go and attend one from a voluntary agency as well, because they are very different and you will know in your heart of heart what feels better for you. And that's what I would say, to go and have a look at both and just feel what you think's right for you.
Yeah, can I just that as well? I think the thing that I'd always want to say to people is to check what post-adoption support is offered. So again, that varies quite a bit from place to place, but we sadly didn't get that much post-adoption support. I think that wasn't to do with who we adopted through, but actually I think there was some admin stuff, but post-adoption support was a little bit hit and miss for us, whereas I know people that it's actually been quite robust, and it's been almost as a structure of post-adoption support, and for me that's really key, because adoption isn't the 6 months of a process to become adoptive parents. It's when the child is placed with you, that's adoption. And that's when you need the support. So you know, Adoption UK do the most incredible job, but if you can also get adoption support through whoever you adopt with, that's fantastic too.
Yeah, and they actually have a legal obligation for 3 years post-adoption order to put that support in place. So you need to be making sure that they are robust in their support for you. Ask the questions, ask if you can speak to other adopters. And social media is great for finding information like that out. Got another question. Are all adopted children likely to have experienced trauma? Short answer, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Next.
And even if that is fostered to adopt, where the child is placed straight from hospital, they will still have had the trauma of the pregnancy, of not then hearing that the voices of being the same, and it's still a trauma and it's still a loss that they've gone through, even coming straight from hospital. And that's something to make sure you really take on board.
And that's one of those myths, isn't it? I think that wider society, I find I'm constantly having to battle against, is the, oh, but you adopted him so young, but he's now in a loving family, hasn't that washed away everything? And actually one of the biggest and most freeing realizations I've had recently is that I will do my absolute best and we will love this child, but actually there is an element of the trauma that I think will probably always be with him, and we will help him with that, but we can't fix everything. And these children are up for adoption for a reason. Yes, they need a different kind of parenting because of reason, but you know, I think assume that there will be a level of trauma no matter what that is, and then actually you sort of don't have to be these wonder perfect anyway.
Yeah, and I also think one of the other myths that we come across an awful lot is that it's
try your best and do what.
Oh, you're cutting out. I think one of the other myths that we come around an awful lot is that the younger that they're adopted, like you say, the easier it is. My son was 7.5.
Yeah.
And I always joke that actually at 7.5 he had a much better understanding, and he could tell me that he hated me rather than just trying for me to guess from his behaviour.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and I, you know, he's 16 now. Wouldn't be without him. Is my absolute world. But the short answer is that yes, all children will come with trauma. Yeah,
and that's when the self-care and the support structures don't. I'm not just saying lip service to them. They are your absolute lifeline. Self-care and external support are paramount.
Absolutely. Would adoption agency be put off considering me as I continue IVF? Yes. You won't find an adoption agency that will take you on while you're considering IVF. It needs to be very much that you're ready for adoption and ready to look at an adoption. And as Anya said, it's about coming to terms, because adoption isn't a fix for infertility. It's a very different method to become a family and to become a parent. So you would absolutely need to make sure that you've gone through IVF, if that's the route you decide to go down, and decided that you're stopping with any fertility treatment before any adoption agency would take you on. They also will recommend that for at least 6 months after you have a child placed, that you use contraception, because it's actually quite high statistics how many adopt and then go on and fall pregnant.
And it is, it's funny, because when you've been, like I said earlier, this time of being told life is on hold, to have an adoption agency say to you, look, you need to wait 6 months to a year, can feel such a kick in the teeth. But that's where you need to reframe that and think of proactive time towards adoption, but not rush the move from one thing to another, because they are very, very different experiences.
Absolutely. Right, I think that's the last of the questions. So if anybody's got any other questions, Vicky, I'm sorry, the internet has been a bit hit and miss today, so I apologise. I've taken your email address down and I will send you the recording. It'll also be available, we will advertise it on social media for you to go in and click. I've just put my email address in there, because I'm claire.tyler@adoptionuk.org.uk. So if anybody's got any questions, any queries, please email me. I'll answer anything. I'll give you a very open, honest answer. But I'd also like to invite you all, 11 o'clock on Friday, we've got a meeting for prospective adopters, and adopters are waiting for a match that you don't have to be an Adoption UK member for. And I'll make sure that goes out also to Anna. And it's a great way to start connecting and start asking questions and having a chat with others who are in the same situation that aren't adopters. And it's just a nice way, I think, of tipping your toe in and you know, making that start to building up. Sorry, we just got one more question. What were the challenges you faced that you mentioned, as opposed to those of having your biological child?
Oh, thank you for that. It has been a very different experience. So I totally 100% know that I love him as much as my biological children. That's never been an issue. Well, as in it grew, but it certainly isn't an issue now. The love that I feel for is absolutely the same, but the challenges with him, because of his additional needs, he has fetal alcohol and ADHD, so meaning that he has real issues with impulse control. We had about a year or so of quite violent and aggressive behaviour, which is very common with FASD. And it did really, really push us as a family, and we had to massively take a step back, look at how we were parenting, yell out for support, and get those support structures in place. But it did test us. Where we are now is we do parent very differently towards him. We've had to learn that actually for us, all the stuff we did with our biological children, charts, time out, all the stuff that society says is so fantastic, do not work with a child with that level of trauma and damage. They just don't. I wish they did, because they worked a dream with my other two, but they don't. So there's no point us. What we have to do is learn to diffuse the situation and then explain. We have to really build relationship with him. We have to let go of certain expectations. So we have learned such a huge amount the last few years, but we did hit a very, very difficult time. And that's why I'm so passionate about not paying lip service only when you're going through the assessment period to self-care and your support structures. Because once you're in that stage of a child having been placed with you, you don't want to be scrabbling around trying to work on those two things. You want to almost have muscle memory of, okay, I call this person and I go for a walk and I do this. That's how I self-care. That's how I reach out. But I wish we'd had that in place in a more robust way. So where we're at now is we have 3 amazing kids, and he is wonderful. He is hilarious and funny and exhausting in a way that I can't even explain. But we wouldn't have a life without him. He's incredible, but it is very, very, very challenging.
No, absolutely. And talking about FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, we have a free webinar Wednesday evening. So right. Again, the details will be posted up on social media. So Anya, if you're okay to put that out as well, that'll be great.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think, you know, the more that you can use this time and learn, and everybody from Adoption UK is very open and honest. There isn't a question that we won't answer, and we will give you the answers very straight. Had a question come in: what age were our children when they were adopted? It said mine was 7.5. He's 16 now, so we are year 11.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's really quick. Yeah.
So our little one was 15 months, and our middle child was 7 at that stage, and our other child was 10. And again, one of those things that I really railed against, being a very impatient person at the time, was needing that big-ish age gap between middle child, biological child, and adopted child. I just thought, oh, it's much of a muchness, but actually, gosh, in hindsight, those 4 years between are so important, because it's just given that breathing space between the two of them, and it means that he is the little one in the house. And they get on really well, actually. When they're not trying to kill each other, they get on really well, the 2 boys. But that little bit of age is so important. So again, that's one of those things just to be aware of if you do have biological children.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Last shout out for any questions that you may have. But I said, you've got my email address, so please drop me an email. Keep an eye on social media, because I said we've got the 2 free webinars that are open to everybody happening this week. So please join in, because it's great to be able to reach out like this and start getting the message out. And if you need anything, then we're here for you.
Yeah, and please contact me as well. Twitter, I'm just Sizer on Twitter. Or you can email me, Anya at fertilitynetworkuk.org. So anything we can do to help as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We really do appreciate you spending the time. It's great to see that you're joining in. So thank you. And thank you so much, Anya, for all of this. This has been brilliant. So thank you. If you're okay to hold on while everybody else drops off, that'd be great. Yeah. Thank you. But thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
For having with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really interesting that somebody's already in a doctor, but they found it really interesting.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
Okay.
it's funny, there isn't loads that I can find. I think places have done bits of work on moving from one to, yeah, it's an area, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's so important that we make sure that we're covering as much as we possibly can for people.
Yeah, you are. You're doing, it's fantastic.
But thank you everyone for joining us. I shall start taking everybody off. That's great. Thank you very much for joining us today.
See the numbers go down.
Yeah, it's quite bizarre, isn't it, how you kind of see remove. That's it, right.
Oh,
Thank
you,
you
Claire.
so much. That was brilliant. Thank you. Thank you
You're
very
so
much.
welcome.
The feedback.
Sorry, it was a bit glitchy. Oh, good. Let me know.
Yeah, it's one of those things, but thank you so much. But no, it's been really, I've just been kind of reading the comments and the questions, and it's great to just be able to kind of answer those questions straight away.
Yeah.
Think, you know, things about, you know,
yeah.
I thought I could go straight from IVF straight into the adoption process, and people starting to already think about that. Actually, no, that's not the way it's going to work.
Yeah, and also I think it's lovely doing it with someone like you, because I can talk definitely about the emotional move from one, but you guys are the experts on practicality as well. And so I think it's really, really helpful you being able to answer it. Thank you.
I really appreciate